Hello, and welcome to the Working Through Change workshop. This workshop is for all ENT staff members as we go through some pretty extraordinary events this spring and summer here at UCLA. I'm Gina Biri, and I'm in training and organizational development in events and transportation and a certified facilitator for this content. So I'm really glad that you took the time to be a part of this. And I think without further ado, I'll go ahead and jump us into what the agenda is for our time during this workshop. So the first thing that I'd like to share is that we're going to talk about how change affects people. So many management and leadership books are written on how change affects an organization or a business, but what we really want to focus on here with this workshop is the people side and how people get affected from change and uncertainty. And next, we'll review the change cycle model. And the change cycle comes from an organization based out of Texas called the Change Cycle Limited, and so or Incorporated. And they've got a really great model to help us wrap our heads around some of the things that happen pretty predictably and sequentially when we are reacting to or immersed in a time of change and of uncertainty. And the next is we will take a look at that business case of change. It's a really nice layer into what we go through when we're dealing with change as people, but then also what happens in an organization. And there are four points in that model as well. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll take a look at working through change and have a look at what we can control and what we can't control, and think about some positive ways to go about moving through change. So the first question that I have for you is, how do you describe change? So I'll give you just a moment to think about that. What thoughts or feelings come to your mind? And then next, I'd like to ask you, how do you describe change at UCLA? I'll give you just another moment to think about that. Sometimes change at work can mean something very different than change in our personal life, and vice versa. So the fact of the matter is that the biochemistry of change is that no matter what type of change you're experiencing, whether it's in your personal life or in your work life, change has a very real effect on us as human beings. There's no denying that. Although we may assign different emotions to it and different thoughts and thinking preferences, but there's a very real impact to the brain. So I want to get into a little bit of neuroscience about this. And this comes from some work done by a neuroscientist at Chapman University. And this work was published just about 5 years ago. And so this is the physiology of change. Here we talk about three different layers of the brain. It's primitive, mammalian, and complex. And so I've color-coded these words very specifically because you can think of it like a stop or a traffic signal, with the red for being stopped in motion, the yellow for things idling along, and then the green for go. So what's going on when we experience change or uncertainty is that the primitive layer of our brain, which is the oldest area of our brain, kicks into overdrive. And so this is located at the very back of our head, right where the neck meets the head, and that's called the amygdala. And so this area of our brain is responsible for our survival, for safety, for basic needs, fight, flight, or freeze, if you will. And so that's where we do a lot of our thinking when we're faced with strife or stress or uncertainty or adversity. And then next, the mammalian layer of the brain is responsible for our perceptions, our lenses, our filters, how we reason, our creativity, our motivation, and our ability to engage in problem solving and collaboration with others. And then finally, the complex layer of the brain is responsible for both conception and application and seeing the big picture, implementation, if you will. And so this area of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex, and that's located right behind your forehead. And so this is the area of our brain that is visionary in nature and really doesn't get to do its job when we're under a lot of stress. I've heard it said before that under stress, we regress. And so that is an easy way to remember that under stress, we go back into our primitive brain again, which is responsible for our survival. So, there are some things that are predictable and some things that are not predictable when it comes to our brain's reactions to change. And so I want to get into some of those predictable responses that I mentioned earlier. So, or that I alluded to earlier, our brains create responses that are both predictable and sequential. And you'll see a little bit more of what I mean by that when I show you the graph later on. Next, our brain distorts, deletes, and generalizes new information. And this is just characteristic of all human brains. They're called filters or lenses. So it's why two people can hear the same thing in a meeting and come away with very different perspectives. Our brains also make no differentiation between good or bad changes because at its most base level, the brain is just a swarm of chemicals and hormones and neural pathways, and it doesn't assign emotions to things that happens. It just knows if it's being taxed or not. So that's where a good change, like say a marriage to your soulmate, can be received by your brain just as stressfully as, say, a stay-at-home order. And then the next is that our brains make no differentiation between externally imposed changes or internally driven changes. And really what this means is, like, let's say you decide to go on a diet because you have an event coming up or family reunion or things like that. And so you want to lose some weight. So you put yourself on some caloric restriction, and then you begin to jog 2 miles a day. Well, that creates a stress and a tax and a change to your brain, even though it's internally driven, just as the tax would be received by your brain if, say, you received a jury duty summons in the mail and now you have to go through all this rigmarole in order to fulfill those duties. Or say you get a notice from the DMV that you have to renew your driver's license and come in person and take a test. So our brains, in terms of stress, doesn't make a differentiation between what we tell it to do or what someone else tells it to do. And then lastly, our brains respond on a multidimensional level, which is, you can kind of say it's doing all of this at a subconscious level. It's just really not even aware that it's going through this. So I want to take us next to some things that are unpredictable when it comes to change. That is the time of response and the intensity of the response. So we don't know to what, how long or how quickly someone will take to get over a reaction or a response to a stressor or a change. And we also don't know to what depth of emotion they'll feel their feelings as a result of that change. So that ties into the intensity of response. So the next thing I'd like to do is take us through the change cycle. So this is the model that I was referring to. So in the change cycle, there's a lot going on this graph, but I want you to stay with me and we'll kind of take it together piece by piece. So there are a total of 6 stages in the change cycle. And there are a total of 3 colors that you see here. And these colors, again, are indicative of a traffic signal with the red, yellow, and green. And so we'll just dig in here with stage 1, and I'll move through the graph so that you can kind of have an understanding of what we're talking about here. So, in stage one, after a change event happens, as indicated with that blue triangle, you experience loss, a loss of routine, a loss for the way things were. And depending on the type of the loss, you can feel everything from fear to just being ill at ease, kind of all of those things that typically come about when we experience a loss. Thoughts become cautious at this point in time. Our brains are really pumping the brakes and saying, "Hey, I'm going to start, engaging the mammalian brain. I'm going to engage the amygdala because I don't feel safe, and so I need to think about fight, flight, or freeze." And then next is that behavior is paralyzed. So this is where people simply don't know what to do. The shot's been fired, and it's like, okay, all right. What do I do now? The stay-at-home order has come down. Okay, I'm home. What do I do? And so again, that can take people different amounts of time to go through. For some, it could be 1 to 2 weeks. For some, it could be 1 to 2 months. It really just depends on the person. The next stage that people move into is the stage of doubt. This is where feelings of resentment start to occur. Thoughts become very skeptical, and then behavior is very resistant. Again, we're still operating out of the amygdala, and we're still in the mode of survival and keeping ourselves safe. And then something very different happens once you move into stage three. Congratulations, you get to experience discomfort. This is where feelings of anxiety occur, and anxiety as an emotion is a response to events of the future and unknown nature. And so that's where we start to feel anxious. Thoughts can be confused because there's either too little information, not the right information, and it's challenging to lead through those waters, or wade through those waters rather. And then behavior is unproductive. And so the thing that I like about this model here, this is backed up by decades and decades of research, is that, with behavior being unproductive in stage three, that's kind of what I like to say a no harm, no foul kind of thing. We can't expect people to be productive or successful in any of the first three stages, and that's just normal. So it's about coping, and it's about getting through and getting through together. And so I'll come back to the danger zone here in a moment, but I do want to move into stage four so that you can see how discovery is so different from discomfort. At the time of discovery, this is where there are feelings of anticipation as opposed to anxiety. Thoughts become resourceful in nature, and behavior is energized. People start to check in, they start to feel a little bit more engaged, they start to think about what's possible. Now, going back to the danger zone here in the middle of stages three and four refers to a couple of different things. So, if a person can't move from stage three to stage four, they check out. Um, and again, there's no tried and true, okay, after 4 months of being in stage three, you should be able to, prove that you're coming through to stage four. That's just not the case. But what you do see if people don't move from stage three to stage four is you continue to see them kind of idling in anxiety, confusion, and unproductive behavior, or they go back to stage one. So they either check out and kind of remain in stage three, or they will go all the way back to stage one and experience the loss and the doubt all over again. So it's really important that as we think about self-leadership and how we influence our team members, our colleagues, and things like that, whether or not you have a position of formal leadership, is that we are kind of conscious of this. We're aware of the fact that we do need to hit discovery at some point in time. And that's just going to be dependent upon a number of different things. And so I think that probably many of us in ENT are experiencing discomfort because it's just icky right now. We have a brand new president up at UCOP, and we are dealing with a global pandemic, and the campus is reacting as quickly as they can, and it probably seems like it's not quick enough, and so there's just a lot of discomfort going on. So, next, I want to move us into stage 5. This is about understanding. This is where feelings of confidence occur. This is where people start to feel so much better. Thoughts become pragmatic, and behavior is productive. So, this is where you really have an understanding of what's changing, for who, why, and some kind of a when, like a timeline, for example. And then lastly, we move into the stage of integration, or stage 6. And that's where people experience feelings of satisfaction, their thoughts are focused, and their behavior is generous. And we can see this at an organizational level too, where during good times when things are humming along nicely, merits happen, and bonuses and raises and things like that, and different perks. And then, as you can see, as given by its name, it's a change cycle, and then something changes, and then we can move all the way through it again. But I think that knowledge is power, and by knowing that this model occurs in the way that it does with regards to the way that the brain responds to change, we can move through it a little bit more quickly, hopefully. So there will be it can serve as a bit of a salve if you know what you're going through, and also what your colleagues and teammates are going through too. All right, so next up, I have a video for us to watch. It's a very short video. It's only about 3 minutes long, and I want to tee this up before I show it. This video comes from the Franklin Covey organization, which is a world-renowned industry leader, and it's written specifically. I took it from some material that I'm also certified in to teach, and it's given with a leadership slant. So I don't want you to get caught off guard or taken aback by the fact that it continually refers to leading a team, because you can also think of, like I mentioned earlier, self-leadership and influence, and kind of controlling your controllables. So certainly keep an open mind as you watch it, so that you can see the 4 phases that an organization goes through during times of change. I think you'll find it very helpful. So without further ado, I'll go ahead.
Whether you like it or not, change is always happening. So what if you could improve your success rate at leading your team through change? While every change is unique, all change follows a predictable pattern. The pattern is illustrated in the change model. It's a valuable tool to help you lead your team through change and arrive at better performance. Here's how the model works. The vertical line on the left represents results. These might be financial results, manufacturing output, customer satisfaction, or any other metric. The horizontal line represents time and is divided into 4 zones. The first zone, the zone of status quo, is when you and your team experience the steady state of business as usual. In this zone, you and your team members probably feel comfortable and in control, but the status quo is temporary. Change is happening all the time. Some changes are determined by you, some are determined for you by others, and some are just unexpected. Choosing to remain in this zone is not an option. If you want to help your team deal with change effectively, help them see that the zone of status quo is temporary. As soon as you sense a change, you enter the zone of disruption, and results become unstable. All changes, no matter what the source, rewrite the rules of the game. Things you are familiar with might disappear, and what worked in the past may not work for you now. The zone of disruption feels uncomfortable at best and miserable at worst. Some people never make it out of the zone of disruption. If you get stuck in this zone, you end up redefining normal as a lower level of results. There are 2 things that can help you and your team get through the zone of disruption. First, understand what's changing and why. Second, decide to act. This is the point of decision. As a leader, you need to get through the zone of disruption yourself and pave the way for others to get through it too. Once across the point of decision, you enter the zone of adoption. This is when you start to adapt to what's changing. In the model, the upward curve looks nice and smooth, but in reality, it might look more like this. Progressing through the zone of adoption can be messy. You and your team may feel lost, experience setbacks, and even question why you're changing things. This is the zone where changes can fail because people can't make it out of the dip. To get through the zone of adoption, keep your team focused on the expected benefits from the change. Learn from setbacks and stay committed. The fourth zone is the zone of better performance. Here, you begin getting results that are significantly higher than before the change. Your team's efforts and struggles pay off. You feel energized and have a sense of achievement. The new results begin multiplying. Team members are enthusiastic, and success breeds more success. You've led your team through change and arrived at better performance. The cycle starts again, and it's time to look for other opportunities to change and improve. The change model helps leaders not to fear change, but to embrace it. Use it to diagnose what zone you and your team are in, and then manage the journey so you arrive successfully at better performance.
Okay, so I hope you found that video a little helpful, to say the least. But I want you to reflect and consider this question now. What resonated for you and your experiences with change when you saw that video? Give you just a moment to think about that. And so I want to show this image here with the organizational change model, and show that during the zone of disruption, there is certainly a negative effect to results that are experienced. And it isn't even until we get to the zone of adoption that things can get to become dicey and a little confusing and perplexing as we try to move ourselves forward, up and out and into the zone of better performance. All right. And so the final question that I have for you, as you kind of just digest this workshop, is how will you apply the change wheel in your unit at Events and Transportation? I'll give you just a moment to think about what's within your um, autonomy of choice, what's within your sphere of influence. I'll give you just a moment. And so, oftentimes when I facilitate this workshop in person, I'll quote from Viktor Frankl, and he talks about how, basically, in a nutshell, in life, we rarely can control what happens to us, but we always have control over our reaction to it. And I think that's actually pretty liberating and very freeing to think, okay, well, I'm going to choose positivity. I'm going to choose today to say something that I'm grateful for. I'm going to choose to um, refresh myself with positive things and the good things that are in my life, whether that's your pets or your kids or your spouse or whoever it may be, or the birds outside, whatever the case may be. And so, in conclusion, I want to share with you that there are additional resources available for you. The Staff and Faculty Counseling Center with Campus Human Resources is offering via Zoom personal counseling, one-to-one counseling, that is, and group sessions as well, some group therapy going on. And then in terms of in-house resources that we can offer to you in events and transportation training and organizational development, we can offer personal coaching and career coaching to support you as you go through some of what you're going through, because everybody's got a load to bear at this point in time, and it can be very challenging. So that's it. That's all I have for you for today. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to look at this workshop, and I hope that you got some good things out of it. We certainly are happy to offer this workshop to intact teams, meaning just with you and your team members, to make it very specific to your group, whereas we have in the past offered this live to everyone in the organization. So several folks reached out after that and said, hey, I'd like this to be done again for my specific team. So please don't hesitate to reach out should you need anything further. All right. Thank you again. And I'm wishing you all the best. Bye bye.